Hello, everyone, and happy Thursday. Thanks so much for coming to the Polar Careers Outside of Academia panel discussion, hosted by the Polar Science Early Career Community Office, or PSECCO. We're going to kick off with a few introductions and then give you a brief overview of the call and shortly get into it. I'm Mariama Dryak-Valleys. I'm the director for PSECCO, and I'm joined today by two wonderful PSECCO team members, Madison Payne and Ethan Sanchez. Madison will be moderating the panel discussion, and Ethan is our go-to person for tech support for the call today. So if you run into any bumps along the way, please directly message him. We're also joined today by four wonderful panelists, John, Stacy, Brenda, and Daphne, who we will hear from here shortly. We're excited to be putting on this event today that will allow us to explore some careers for polar scientists outside of academia, acknowledging that there's even more out there that we won't touch on today. And the motivation for creating this event is to give an idea of career paths outside of the traditional academic route we often learn of when we're going through university. And the interest and need for such an event is clear in the number of people who have registered to date, over 300 people. A brief overview of the call. We're doing introductions and welcome. We'll then do some panelist introductions. We'll hear from them and briefly about their career journeys, and then we'll open up into a panelist Q&A, including questions submitted by you all ahead of time. At the core of PSECCO is building welcoming environments for everyone, and we expect that all attendees will adhere to PSECCO's community guidelines, which are being posted in the chat. We ask that you use these community guidelines and explore them if you're not otherwise familiar with them when interfacing with anyone else on the call. And an overview of these guidelines are included here. Before we introduce our panelists, we want to begin with a land acknowledgement. Many of us here do polar science in locations across the United States and beyond, with research focused on both poles and in high alpine regions across the world. And we want to acknowledge that much of that science takes place on the unceded traditional territories and ancestral homelands of Indigenous peoples, and that some of the research done in these locations has historical roots in colonialism. With this land acknowledgement, we celebrate the many contributions of Native peoples to our understanding of the polar regions and recognize the sophisticated and intricate knowledge systems Indigenous peoples have and continue to develop in relationship to their lands. Now, each panelist will give a brief 2-minute introduction sharing about themselves and their career path, and we'll dedicate the remaining time to a question and answer, taking questions you have submitted ahead of time. We ask that you remain muted during the call and are very excited to introduce our four panelists. So first we have Dr. John Farrell, Executive Director for the U.S. Arctic Research Commission. We have Stacy Lucasen, Tribal Research Coordinator with COERIC. Brenda Riley, Operations Director at the Cold Climate Housing Research Center. And Daphne Wellman, Program Specialist with Scholarship Partners Canada. Thank you all so much for being on the call, and we're excited to kick off our introduction with John telling us a bit about what you do.
I'm the executive director of the U.S. Arctic Research Commission, which is a small independent federal agency in the U.S. government. And I'm a scientist by training. I have a PhD in geology, and I think I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Thank you. Stacy.
Waka winga Stacy Lucasen, Tataka Richard Lucasen, Wananaka Sandra Rogers Wing. I'm a super brief introduction. My family is Yupik and Scandinavian. So in Yupik, my nickname is Kungipnek, but most people call me Stacy. I live and work in Eklutna, which is on Dena'ina lands, but grew up further north in Alaska, and am currently working for COERIC as the Tribal Research Coordinator serving the Bering Straits region. Good morning. Good to meet you all.
Thank you, Stacy. Next up, we have Brenda Riley. Hi, everyone. I'm Brenda Riley. I am in Fairbanks, Alaska. I see somebody from UAF in the chat, so hello, neighbor. I am currently the operations director at the Cold Climate Housing Research Center, which is a nonprofit located in Fairbanks, but serving Alaska and the Arctic in building science, research, advocacy, and education. My background is in archaeology, although I did not stay in that career very long and have had a couple of decades worth of nonprofit leadership and development and organization.
Thank you, Brenda. And then finally, we have Daphne Millman.
Hi, everybody. I'm Daphne. I have a background in environmental science, and I am currently a program specialist with Universities Canada based in Ottawa, Ontario. So, on a day to day basis, I manage national scholarship programs that support environmental research in Canada's North, as well as greater inclusion of women in STEM. What I love about my job is being able to see young scientists progress in their studies and in their careers. So, since this is a panel about careers outside of academia, I'll tell you a bit about Universities Canada. So, it's a national not for profit organization. It represents 97 of Canada's universities, and it works on a number of issues that are important to the university sector. So, for example, my portfolio is stuff I work on, research and financial aid for students, but it also works on Action for Net Zero, which is an initiative that focuses on accelerating climate action within the university network. Something else that I could share, I'm originally from a small fishing village in northeastern Quebec, so I am familiar with the challenges of living and working in remote northern communities. When I grew up, people still relied on hunting and gathering for food, and I have memories of being taken out on the land to do this. And of course, since it's in the north, there were also a lot of memories of being snowed in for days, which I'm sure some of the panelists in Alaska can relate to. When I left the north to go down south for my studies, one of the things that struck me the most as a culture shock was how people in cities in the south just went out in snowstorms and tried to get places. And it was so different than the north, where we all prepare, we call it hunkering down, to just let the snowstorm pass and get through it. So I'm happy to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Daphne. All right, so to get us started, I have a question for everybody. And then just as a reminder to our panelists, use the raise hand function just to keep things simple. All right, for the first question, can you briefly share about your career journey and how you got to where you are now? And I'll go ahead and just pick Stacy. Could you get us started?
Sure. Thank you, Daphne, for sharing some about how you grew up. That's definitely how I remember the preparing, the getting ready, and as a kid, I was like, these are so fun, like card games and um, but now like having a kid and doing some of that preparation with her. We don't live quite as far north, so mostly it's like 2-day power outages at most, but um trying to like build up the fun of it. I'm like, oh, my parents did a lot of work. Um, I also, do want to share that I have a kid and that's part of my career choices is to be able to raise her and um, have her with me and be able to take her in a lot of my roles that I've had. And that has been intentional to like build in space as a caregiver in my paid work as well. Before this, I worked in an accounting office. I worked at a hospital in the operating room as a gopher, get everything. Um, I worked in a nonprofit for a Native organization. I worked for a different Native organization that is here in Alaska. Then I worked at setting up a nonprofit, doing birth work and supporting laboring families, um, wrote a curriculum for the state, and oh, a political campaign. And is that 10? I've had a whole long wandery path because a lot of these are things that need to be done and come up, and it's less of a, I'm going to work at this specific organization, but this opening, this opportunity to work um, fits with the rest of my life at this time. And so for COERIC as the tribal research coordinator, it was a new role. And COERIC is a tribal consortia of the 20 tribes of the Bering Strait region. And while we do have some funding that comes like through compact with the US federal government, a lot of the work that COERIC does is similar to a nonprofit where um, we do grants and have reporting responsibilities like that. And so this job is, it uses a lot of the skills that I've picked up in other roles. Um, and I think that that is not dissimilar for, like that you bring all these disparate pieces that have come from different jobs and experiences. And a lot of work outside academia is like making that fit and making it where you're like, oh, here are all of these things that I know how to do and bring. And a lot of them boil down to like recording what you're doing and being able to communicate about it. And I think that's like the through line through all of those otherwise really different sounding jobs that I've had. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. That was a really great lots of stuff along that journey. It was awesome to hear that. Brenda, go ahead.
Unmute. My career path sounds almost just like yours, Stacy. Of course, Fairbanks is slightly bigger than Nome, but I grew up in Skagway, Alaska, which is on the coast. We call it the southeast coast, but it would be like the very upper northwest coast of America. And Skagway is a historic gold rush town. And so when I was about 6 or 7, there was a National Park Service archaeological excavation happening right next to my house. And these beautiful scientists let little 6-year-old me come and pester them every single day. And they finally put me to work on the shaker. And I loved it. And I thought, I want to be an archaeologist when I grow up. And so at UAF, my family moved to Fairbanks, the interior of Alaska, when I was about 11, and didn't think about it again. Went to UAF and decided to become an archaeologist. So I did that. I also had 2 young children. I started my family very, very early. Don't recommend. Love them. Wouldn't take it back, but it is added layers of complexity that have changed my life. I worked for Colorado State University at the Center of Environmental Management for Military Lands, which held at the time the contracts for Fort Wainwright and Eielson and other bases in Alaska to do environmental mitigation, including archaeology. And I was in graduate school, and I sort of like had the thought that this is a very competitive field, and it's not necessarily one that worked well with having 2 boys and needing to be in one place. So a lot of the colleagues that I saw, if they had a coveted position at UAF, they were coming in from other places with PhDs. And then everybody who was working on getting to that stage in their career was what we called a shovel bum. So I would travel around and work for, at the time, $10 an hour. And I just knew that wasn't sustainable. So I actually left my graduate program and did a number of things. And then I had another child and realized something that, so growing up in small places, and I'm sure that Daphne and Stace, you guys know exactly what I'm talking about. We travel, we call it to the lower 48 from Alaska. And we go to places and we think, wow, why can't we have nice things? So one place that I always sought out for the boys was children's museums. And I would come back to Fairbanks and be like, why can't we have nice things here in Fairbanks? So when I became pregnant with my daughter, I knew that was the time. So I built the Fairbanks Children's Museum. I was the founding executive director, and we started with monthly events. And after 2 years of that, we had a partnership with the University of Alaska and the Museum of the North to put in a mini museum. And the year after that, we opened in a permanent downtown location. And that museum is still going strong. I have since left. I then went to run our local United Way. And then after the pandemic, I set up my own shop where I support nonprofits. And in fact, my position at Cold Climate Housing is a temporary position to help them with the transition in leadership. So I'll be here as their acting operations director until the end of the year.
Thank you. Yeah, again, yeah, so many different things that you've done. That's awesome. Daphne or John, any preference? Who goes next? Go ahead, Daphne.
I can go. Yeah, so it's going to be, I think, a similar trend of doing a lot of different steps to get to where I am. So like I mentioned in the intro, my background is in environmental science. And first, when I was younger during my studies, I was convinced I was going to be an environmental scientist. I was going to work in academia. My goal was simply to be an expert in something. That's what I had in my mind. But then as I started working in labs and working on research projects, I discovered it wasn't for me. I couldn't articulate it at that time, but I think what it was is I just didn't have the patience at that stage of my life. Like science seemed a very long process. You spent years, working on a project, collecting data, analyzing it, building models. There was so much work that went in before you could release anything to the world. And I was like, this is just not for me. I needed to work on real world problems. I needed something that had more immediate results or impact. So I left academia and I went into environmental consulting. I absolutely loved environmental consulting because at that stage of my career, it gave me everything I needed. So I had the mix of what I was getting from academia, where you would go out into the field and then bring back your samples, send them for analysis, compile the work, do your report. But it was immediate because we were working for clients and results had to, get done within a certain time frame. So there was a lot more turnover and I could see impact a lot sooner. So I really enjoyed that. I stayed there for a number of years, but then eventually I wanted to work on bigger projects. And within the company has had a very specific niche. So I needed to go elsewhere to start looking to do some of the things at the level that I wanted to do them. So I transitioned from the corporate sector into the not-for-profit sector, and I never looked back. So I've worked in not-for-profit organizations of various sizes. So I've been in organizations with 3 people, with 20 to 30 people, and with 100 plus people. I've worked at various levels on local projects, like I mentioned at the beginning, regional, national, and international projects. So the not-for-profit sector, I'll always be grateful because it gave me a chance to apply the knowledge I had learned in environmental science, but also to broaden that skill set. So when you're in small organizations, you wear many hats. You don't get, no one boxes you in. You can start the day as a receptionist, but by afternoon, you're coming up with a marketing strategy. So with that, I got to touch on board development, governance, financial management, fundraising, and also communications. So communications was a really hard struggle. And I see it with a lot of the students in science that get the awards is we're taught technical writing. So if you want to write a technical manual, it's great, but communicating to the general public is a whole different set of skills that you need. And working in the charitable sector, where you had to take stuff and make it accessible to a broad audience, really benefited me in a number of ways. So one of the last projects I was working on was with, so I'll say like a lot, when I worked in the not-for-profit sector, my main focus was environmental issues related to food and fiber production. So essentially helping a lot of Canadian farmers transition from conventional farming practices into low input and or organic practices. So we had a partnership at one point with an Indigenous community in northern Manitoba. And while I was there, and I was like getting all of these, the landscape was very similar to what I had grown up with. And so all of these memories started coming back of what it was like when I was younger. And then I just thought, wouldn't it be great to go back and to try, to fulfill one of my dreams from earlier, where I just wanted to do environmental science in the North. And then lo and behold, the opportunity that I'm working on right now does just that. So it gives students the opportunity to go into the North and do research. So that's kind of like a bit of, it definitely wasn't planned out, but there was this interest in learning more and doing different things and taking on whatever needed to be done. I think that's one of the things that also you develop in working with the not-for-profit sector, is that whatever comes up, you're the person. There's no one else. So you learn things, or you have to learn things really quickly. So I'll end with that.
Thank you, Daphne. And then last but not least, John.
Thanks, Madison. 2 minutes, right? Thanks. Yeah, it's good to see friends and colleagues among the participants. I would summarize the answer to my question about my career journey as a drunken sailor's random walk. I would never have predicted where I am now from where I started, which was cutting grass, delivering papers, working as a busboy, working as a carpenter's assistant. I realized I made friends and enjoyed that manual labor, but I wanted to do something else. So I went to college, became a scientist because I love science. And then I went to graduate school because I still loved science, wanted to do more of it. And then after a PhD, I still love science. So I did research as a postdoc in the US and in Canada, got my own grants, which was a lot of fun. And then I had a major decision whether to take and accept a tenure track faculty position in the university or work for a nonprofit science organization that was running the world's largest earth science program, the ocean drilling program, and very different kinds of trajectories there at that split point. But I chose to go with a nonprofit organization in DC and manage science rather than conducting it myself. Had a couple sleepless nights thinking, oh my God, I've diverted off the academic track. But I quickly came to appreciate how much I enjoyed serving a community, serving the scientific research community. That gave me great vicarious pleasure. And then from that, interestingly, I pivoted back into academia, didn't realize I could become an associate dean, even though I wasn't a faculty member, and served for a few years at the Graduate School of Oceanography as the associate dean of research and administration. And then from there, I pivoted to my current position about 20 years ago in the federal government in the Arctic. My PhD was on the equatorial Pacific, which is a far cry from the Arctic, but I ended up there by these various strange steps. And that's the 2 minutes. Thanks, Madison.
Thank you, John. Yeah, so lots of wandering paths. It's really good to hear. And I feel seen. Okay, so this next question can be for anybody. And then, yeah, feel free to raise your hand. How is the workplace culture and work-life balance where you are today? Give you a second to ponder that. Okay. Stacy, would you like to go? I'm interpreting that as a yes.
Sure. It's it's good where I am. I think the work-life balance when I was an independent contractor was the most challenging, because you work as much as you take on, and it's really hard sometimes to estimate how much of yourself any given project will take. Um, and I think that's a probably many of us have done where we're like, we could do that, but it's not like a set 9 to 5. And so maybe that's similar to academia of not knowing quite how much um, that will, a different project will take of your time and energy. But now, like working for Coeric, it's really good. They're really intentional about making good leave, and we have subsistence leave and family leave, and so looking for those things, like if that's what's important, um, to make your life feel good. Like I'm really happy with that.
Thank you. Does anybody else have anything to share? Yeah. Daphne, I see you unmuted.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Madison.
Oh,
Let's go.
Brenda, do you want to go?
Sure. Yeah, I was gonna again ditto Stacy says. So I wear both hats. Currently my full-time client, if you will, is Cold Climate. And the that is a small nonprofit. There's about 6 employees, and it is fantastic. We've got a great hybrid work culture where we can work from home, where I am right now, or go into the office. I do make time for my other clients, but they know that they're kind of on the back burner for the next 6 months. And like Stacy said, working for yourself can be really fantastic. I do a number of things from organizational development for a for-profit company to writing grants. But when you do work for yourself, it is 24/7. So I'm really enjoying focusing primarily on Cold Climate because I don't have to think about it on Saturday and Sunday. It's been a very long time. So when you're the executive director of nonprofits, that is not a thing. There is no work-life balance. You are 24/7. You are picking up the phone. You are on call all the time. So there's just a different variety of lifestyles that come with different jobs, and each one of them has benefits. So very happy to be where I am right now.
I will add to that. I agree very much with Brenda's statement. Different jobs come with different lifestyles, but also I think as a individual, your definition of work-life balance, or as I like to say, life-work balance, changes with time as well. So when I was younger and I wanted to learn and I wanted to be involved, looking back, I would say I was very much a workaholic. Yeah, because I was passionate about what I was doing and I loved doing it. It didn't really seem like work at all, but it's also not a pace that can be sustained for decades, every day, in and out. So there comes a point where also the amount of time it takes you to do things shifts. So before, when you start something, you invest a lot of time, but then you know how to do it and you're like, okay, I can get this done in no time. Now what's my priority? And then I think there comes a point where things start shifting, and then you may look for different roles within the sector, or that could prompt some kind of career transition. And with regards to workplace culture, I think what I've learned over the years, I like to see it as a community. So there's a bit of give and take. So you have to know what you want in a workplace. And again, that changes over time, but also what you're willing to give back, what you're willing to invest into this community or group of people that you work with. And I think, workplaces are like people. There are good, there are bad, and you have to like pick and choose what works for you. But I think also with workplace culture, what's important is, just like in environmental science, recognizing when something becomes toxic. So I think that's going to have an effect on you and the people around you. So it's important to kind of know what those flags are as you move forward, to be able to approach it with awareness.
I see. Thank you, Daphne. Before we move on, John, do you like to add anything to this? If not,
Yeah, sure. I mean, because a number of the participants are already deeply in academia, I could maybe speak about that shift in work-life balance. I very much like being in academia, and although I was concerned about overproduction of PhDs, not enough job opportunities for them, I was concerned about the vagaries of getting grants and then not getting them. I had some success and some proposals I didn't have success with. And so because my salary depended on that, the uncertainty of that was concerning to me versus a more stable type of work-life balance from that kind of thing. So that did impact in part my decision to work either for a salary at a university or in the federal government. In the federal government, there are a bunch of cultures. There's, first of all, just the overall federal government culture, but it depends very heavily on which agency or department you find yourself. I'm in an extraordinarily small one, so we have extremely different culture than if you're in the Department of Defense or Department of State or National Science Foundation. And I've experienced that. And that's one of the pleasures of my job because I engage on a broad interagency basis. I get to see a lot of those different cultures. And like Daphne said too, I think a lot of the balance part comes from your individual desires and interests. I've always considered my work almost more of a calling than a job. And so I used to find myself working weekends and nights only because I really wanted to. But at other parts of my life, I wasn't able to, and so I had to pull back to more of an 8-hour day. So having that flexibility has been good, but and just feel very fortunate to that my jobs have never really felt like jobs. It's felt like something I'm just passionate about doing, like a calling. Thanks.
I see. Yeah, thank you, John. So for this next question, I'll pivot a little bit, and it's more from the viewpoint of like an undergraduate or a graduate student. And again, it can be for anybody. How should we be communicating the skills that we gain as students to potential employers outside of academia? Yeah, go ahead, John.
Yeah, I think, a lot of the participants have great skill sets. They're developing the ability to read and write, to think critically, to analyze information, to draw conclusions from that. And that is extraordinarily valuable across a wide range of careers. So don't consider yourself, oh, I'm only a physical oceanographer who knows formulas about ocean currents and and therefore I have nothing to offer in a completely different field. That's absolutely wrong. Your talents as students are very directly applicable to be able to analyze and consider, read and write clearly, to speak clearly, is tremendous, are tremendous assets that you have. And so don't ever sell yourself short on those. And don't ever think, oh, well, I can't do that job because I have no experience in that specific application. You'll be surprised at how quickly you can adapt into it.
Yeah, go ahead, Brenda.
Thank you. I have hired dozens of people, and as an employer, the number one thing that I look for when I'm reviewing resumes and applications is attention to detail and knowledge of proper formatting. And that is something in academia that is an essential skill. And so it doesn't necessarily matter to me what an applicant's background is, but if I can tell that the candidate has attention to detail, has the ability to research and address directly the requirements of the position that I'm hiring for, that goes so much further than past jobs on your CV.
Yeah, Daphne, go ahead.
Yeah, I will build on that. I think there is a lot of value in science degrees, and I think a lot of the opportunities I had was because of the skills I acquired with that scientific training. So the first one I would like to point out is what I call problem framing instead of problem solving. So there's going to be a lot of times bosses or colleagues come to you and it's like, I have this problem. I need you to help me with this problem, and you work on the problem. But when you have the analytical abilities like John was talking about, and this ability to think critically, you can go, wait, is this really the problem? Is this the root cause of why this is happening? So I'll give an analogy. So someone comes in and there's water on the floor, and they need you to help them get rid of the water on the floor, to mop it up. But while you're doing this, you realize why, you start thinking, why is there water on the floor? And you realize, oh, there's a hole in the ceiling, or the roof is leaking. And that's why we're getting water on the floor. So that ability to look at what you're doing and to try to think broader perspective, or to reframe, like when you're doing research, to have the right question. And so there's multiple iterations that you do of that to be able to find a feasible way forward. So that ability is really valuable when you're trying to problem solve, because in the corporate sector, time is money. So if you can deal with the right problems, is going to save you a lot of effort. I think the second thing is actually the research abilities. Like there's a lot of times in a lot of jobs, stuff is on the back burner because people haven't had time to think it out, to do this preliminary research or these mini feasibility studies. I have an idea, but I just haven't had time to work it out on paper. So I think as a young scientist, this is something that should be familiar. And this is like value that you can add to this workplace community. When you hear people talking about ideas, you can go back and help flesh it out a bit. Um, the other thing that I see emerging really quickly is the data analysis. So more and more people want to do number crunching, but not everybody is comfortable with number crunching or see how the different data sets work together or can link them together to produce data that people can make decisions from. So I think this is another skill set that people who are trained in science could easily market to potential employers. That's it for me.
Amazing, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and go to the next question. And Stacy, if you'd like to kick us off, that would be great. All right, so can you give folks advice for conducting informational interviews for whatever career they want to pursue? So if somebody's interested in, say, like your career, what's the best way to reach out to them, and what questions should they be asking?
So this, thank you for, I don't know, telling me this is where we're going to talk about. I think this is one of the more challenging questions in this set, because to me, so much depends on where you're at in your life. Like if you are, 22 and are like, all right, got some of, partially through a master's, do I want to go PhD route or do I want to pivot? Or if you're like in your mid 30s and, have a PhD and have been in this for a while and are like at that tenure track, not tenure track point. I feel like those are really different conversations. And a lot of it has to do with like knowing yourself and how much you can even know yourself at those different points in your life. One of the things that we have an intern program at Queric, and I work with some other alumni group stuff. And so have kind of this conversation fairly often with that early, like 22, 23. And at that point, like thinking about my own life, like I knew what I liked to do and I knew like activities wise, but I really didn't understand why some of the like jobs that seem very, very different, where I was like, I loved this and I loved this. And then now that I'm like in my mid 30s, I'm like, oh, here is why. Like for me, one of the things that I really like is I like knowing like the organizational structure. And that's actually a challenge in nonprofits where everybody, has a lot of shared responsibilities and a lot of like, you just pick up and take care of what needs to be done. Um, and so like not having that like sense of, oh, this is the order, like here's the decision maker and like this is the person who makes a choice. Maybe it's not what I would do for like a marketing or, something that I'm not like an expert in, but it's like six of one, half a dozen of the other, somebody just needs to pick. And so realizing like as I got older, like, oh, I like having that clarity. And so not necessarily that where I work has that, but then I can communicate it with like my supervisor to be like, when it's a 50-50 choice, I really don't want that. Like you decide and I'll just go with whatever. And so a lot of that, like what to conduct information about like workplace culture or about like the process of like, what does it look like day to day? Those conversations have definitely evolved as I've been more self-aware, like coming into my 30s. And so I'm sure if you're not, yet in your 30s, you can still have those like self-reflective, like, okay, how do I like to work? And what, is more comfortable, like structures wise. But I do think that they're easier now that I'm older.
Thank you, Cece. Super insightful. In the interest of time, I guess one other person, would anybody else like to add on to that? Let's go ahead. Brenda.
Sorry, my raise hand button is so hidden in a little panel. Apologies. I just want to say from a practical standpoint, right directly to this question, conducting informational interviews, and thinking back to when I was younger, like Stacey was saying, I also struggled with this. And now, and I'm a little bit older, I realize people love to talk about themselves. So if you have the confidence and ability to approach somebody or send an email and say, hey, I'd love to learn about you and your career path. Can I have 20 minutes of your time or buy you a cup of coffee? People love to talk about themselves. So that's one way to sort of get at that and just ask questions. So that's my direct response to that question. But I also want to point out Shahina's comment in the chat function about the generational divide and gatekeeping of knowledge and resources. And I want to say that that is definitely something that I felt in my early academic career. And that's been 25, 30 years. And I don't know what the answer is to that, but I think when there's a scarcity of resources, that is a very real issue. And maybe somebody else has an answer to that.
Okay, if not, we can think about that. Yeah. All right, so I think we have time for one more question, and I'll ask John to lead us off. How do you search for jobs and network for job opportunities? So a bit more broad.
Okay, what I did was I certainly joined certain organizations back in the day that had newsletters where they had positions announced. There's a lot of listservs that announce opportunities. Um, I had the good fortune of engaging with a broad cross-section of scientists because of my participation in some international programs. And that just increased the size of my network. And that was really helpful. Before social media and all that, I'm sort of the elder on this list of people here. So a lot of my stuff was, pre-social media. So everything was IR in real life, right? IRL was everything back then. So, I mean, it was even before internet in some cases. So it was really participating, taking opportunities to engage directly with people led to a broader network, and that led to opportunities. So that was one way. And now networking now is just maintaining those, but in an electronic format. Uh, just going to meetings. You'll have very different conversations with people one-on-one at a meeting in person than you will over an electronic format. I'm convinced of that. And while we have to do a lot electronically like this here, I'm sure I would have very different comments with a number of the participants if we were there in person one-on-one. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Does anybody else want to add to that? Yeah, Daphne.
Yeah, I can add to that. John, thanks for that comment because it brought me back. And I'm like, yeah, actually, back in the day, events were really important. So you would go to conferences or events in your area of expertise. But as I'm thinking back, the other thing that was really important was doing community events. Like I think back to some of the festivals I volunteered at. Definitely not in my area of expertise, but it allowed me to meet other people in the community outside of my immediate work area. And that sometimes has benefits down the road that you may not see in the moment. Another thing that I think is important, not only for yourself, but for networking, is monitoring job boards. So I think earlier when I was managing and recruiting people, I did this to kind of see if what we were offering were comparable to other organizations. But I also see it as an opportunity to connect with other people in your network as you get older to say, hey, have you seen this posting? And then it helps kind of initiate that conversation to learn, is this what they're still doing? And you can have a conversation then, well, how does this actually work? So you can combine both things of keeping active in the network with the informational interviews. So it doesn't have to be one or the other or separate things. It could easily blend together over time.
Thank you, Daphne. All right, before we move on and wrap up, would anybody else like to share anything about that question? All right, awesome. All right. Oh, yeah, go ahead, Stacy.
Oh, I've definitely gotten some jobs and opportunities outside of jobs that are career related through those like on purpose, like I'm looking, this is a job board, but a lot of them come up just by having community outside of my house and my family and being sort of open and vulnerable and talking like, oh, I like when I was contracting, like I could be working more, like I don't, here are these things, here's these current jobs I have, but it's feeling less secure or more lean and then having that conversation with like neighbors and people maybe that I don't think of as like these are my like job friends or colleagues, but knowing folks outside of that or like that friends of friends and being, I don't know, maybe I'm just chatty and I'm willing to like talk with semi-strangers, but it is something that's sort of practice to be comfortable saying that. Um, so encourage everybody to like, just, it's not that bad.
Yeah, I agree. Awesome. Thank you, Stacy. All right, so I guess as our final question, and I'll open up the space for anybody. So anything else that you'd like to share that we haven't really touched on? Give us a moment to think about that. Okay. All right, okay. And if you think of anything else, feel free to just pop it in the chat. So with that last question, just like to say thank you again to everybody for joining and thank you for agreeing to be on this panel and also to the rest of the PSECCO team for helping set this up. And with that, I'm going to pass it back over to Mariama.
Yeah, just wanted to echo Madison in thanking our panelists for sharing your journeys and so much insightful information. Ethan's sharing a screen here, which just shows other events or opportunities you can get involved in via PSECCO. For those of you who don't know, and I think this is especially relevant during this semi-strange time in the US anyway, we have a PSECCO community Slack channel where you can connect with early career researchers from all over the world, from all sorts of different disciplines, and kind of build a polar community where you might not otherwise have it or be connected to folks there. And so we'll share a link to how you can get connected with that in the chat. And then we have a couple of other upcoming opportunities. We actually used the PSECCO community chat to kind of poll folks who are connected to that space on what sorts of events you'd be looking for, like online events this fall. One of the things that really rose to the top was an interest in an international networking event and connecting with folks, other early career researchers from around the world. So we're intending to run an event like that in September, and also kind of give a high-level overview on how to connect with others in a culturally respectful way, and how to speak across cultural boundaries. Also, PSECCO supports the IARPIC mentorship program. And so if you're not already familiar with that program, they run awesome mentorship circles for polar scientists. It's open to both Arctic and Antarctic scientists. In a circular mentorship format. So there are folks ranging from early career to senior career, and each quarter there are different topics that are considered. The call for involvement into the mentorship program is open until August 22nd. And we really encourage you to get connected there, especially with so much of the input we've been getting from early career researchers. Maybe slightly similar to what Shahina shared in the chat, is that folks, it seems, have been struggling to connect with mentors in various spaces. And so this is a great opportunity to get plugged in. Finally, PSECCO will be at the American Geophysical Union meeting in December, and we'll be running a social event and multiple sessions there. So we encourage those of you who will be in that space to connect with us, and to connect with us on all the platforms otherwise. Thanks so much, everyone, and we hope you have a really good day and you get a break before your next thing, maybe at the top of the hour. Bye.